It's just the H is not coming through, beautiful community. So we're going to have to start without it. Hello. Hello, beautiful community. Can you hear me? So nice, Amalfi Tan, of you to be here. We do not need thumbsticks, thumbnails, timestamps today. The most mellifluous democracy in the world, the sickest democracy in the world, but one of the most resilient democracies in the world, has had a big change with Joe Biden dropping out. And what I'm going to do with you today, I have no idea, but we're going to be just a little bit more emotional and grounding. And tomorrow on the main channel, we're going to have a much more robust and systematic analysis. So I may, with your permission, sway in the direction of grounding us and away from just focusing on the hardcore analytical aspect. That's one way or another, perhaps through the night, I'll get prepped to share with you tomorrow on the main channel. So we're going to be a bit gentle here. A lot of people are telling me they're freaking out. And my thought is always that keeping democracy in patchy waters, in rocky waters, is a marathon. And that while Trump is a semi-existential threat to US democracy, however the Trump threat expresses itself, whether he gets his term in office, which is likely, or he doesn't, which is unlikely, there will be stronger and sterner tests of US democracy over the next 20 years, with candidates who are not semi-existential threats, but perhaps threats between the semi-existential and the existential. So my advice always is do not unnecessarily drown yourself in the lake preemptively just because you feel you're going to face a risk of drowning in the future. So please try to understand that nobody benefits if you make a somewhat existential situation ultimately existential for yourself emotionally. It doesn't improve your personal life, doesn't improve your mental health, doesn't improve your democracy either. So one of the analytical points that is also an emotional point that I want to make is that there is this very important dimension of celebrating people who have left power voluntarily. Because there is a tendency to say, for some people, yes, that's wonderful that Joe has left. But for others to say, well, he has left too late. He should never have tried to run for a second term. He shouldn't be saying that he won't be in the race for the second term, but he should be resigning, and so on and so forth. And you actually know some of my own analysis. Indeed, my early analysis in 2020 was that Biden shouldn't run because of his cognitive decline, but that he lucked out, and I thought he would luck out because of the appalling management of the public health crisis by Trump. So I'm myself somebody who has been critical of Joe Biden's relationship with power more recently. However, even if you think all of that, it's a very important thing in democracy to celebrate abandonment of power. It's a really important thing that even if you are critical of Joe Biden doing it too late or doing it in the wrong way, that you celebrate abandonment of power, that you understand that Trump would never have done what Biden has done, and that it is genuinely a hard thing to do. because power and the thirst for power and the attraction of power once you have power is it's one of the most irresistible human impulses, especially if on top of that you also think that you're competent in the way you're exercising it. So it's always a sacred thing, even if done imperfectly, when power is abandoned in democracy. Feel that, recognize that, and have a good feeling about it. You know, the opposite feeling to the feeling that you have when there are democratic reversals in your country or in other parts of the world. So, stepping down, even in the most imperfect way, is something that is in the realm of the sacred in democracy because it is so bloody hard for humans to do. So, in this sense, this is something that we have to start with and understand that it was difficult for Joe because he was having a Shakespearean moment. He was really pulled between two sides, and ethical adequacy in power in him triumphed after a tough fight it had inside Joe's soul with the thirst for power. So you might say, well, shouldn't the victory for ethical adequacy been earlier and clearer? Yes, you can say that. But the fact that that side won inside Joe Biden is something that anybody democratically minded needs to have a good feel about. So that's really important. Hello, Alison. Hello, Jim Schofield. Let's have a look at how we are doing. Armory Cat says, Vlad, I wanted to say I love you so much. Thank you so much for your love. Since about a year ago, you've become an integral part of my life. I've only had a few days without seeing you. Thank you so, so much. What a privilege it is to um, have you with me, and I intend to not fail you. Do my best. Good morning from a freezing Hobart. Oh, good morning, good morning. Yes, missing very much your parts of the world. Harris AOC 2024. No, it's impossible. You cannot run two women. One good point about Rishi Sunak in the UK is that he admitted that he lost and buggered off. I think it's also very important to give politicians credit these days. I mean, can't take it for granted when they lose and they actually leave power. I think that's really special. Almner, hello from New York. Hello, no, hello to me from you in New York City, and hello to you in New York City from me in East London. Yeah, Whitmer can't run either for other reasons too, but because you can't have two women. Let's have a look. Manchin. Jackie Chan is saying Manchin versus Trump. No. Follow-up thoughts on the term uniparty. Well, there is a tendency to think that somehow all of the establishment is just one thing, and that sense is dramatically kind of stimulated by this word that we talk about a lot, don't we? And you'd probably know it now, Jackie Chan, because you follow me a lot. Opacity, right? The opacity of political institutions to people make you feel that it's all one thing. And because it's all one thing, you can throw tomatoes at it and not make distinctions of better, worse, my preference, not my preference within it. And that is an inevitable consequence of the crisis of trust. And that kind of way of thinking about all of the political establishment in a particular country is going to be more common as the democratic crisis we are in deteriorates without becoming democratic collapse. I mean, we have to recognize, what kind of worst scenarios we're talking about that we're probably going to avoid in the West. If we're talking about a few countries in the West collapsing as democracies in the next 20 years, and I personally anticipate a collapse rate. Well, I don't anticipate any collapse rate. I hope for no collapse rate. But I think it wouldn't be crazy to speculate about a 20% collapse rate of Western democracies over the next quarter century. But think about that. That means most democracies surviving. And in the 20% of democracies that collapse under this cartoonish prediction, it's not a prediction, of course, it's just a sort of a placeholder for expectations that we can be pleasantly surprised or further disappointed. But under that scenario, if your democracy collapses, you can still buy a house, you can still go to the theater, you can still go to the pub, you can still have friends, you can still travel internationally. You're not going to be in Belarus. You're going to be in a country like Hungary if you are in a France where democracy collapses. So it's important to be aware of how really bad, but not ultimately catastrophic, democratic collapse is. Shadow Guy is talking about not all Americans being in America. Some Americans are in different places, like Switzerland. Patrick, thank you so much. Tak is saying that he was just on a Czech political podcast talking about my analysis. And then this was announced. I had an opportunity to look smarter because of you. Thank you very much for your smartness. Karl Marx is saying that her VP is likely to be Shapiro, Mark Kelly, or Whitmer. It's not going to be Whitmer. That's not possible. So I think that we're going to be in for an adventure. And the way I recommend to think about this adventure is in terms of boldness versus passivity. What I know, because I'm not an American citizen, is that you want to be bold when democracies are wonky and you're trying to win in stormy waters. You don't want to be defensive, but every instinct tells you to be defensive. Every instinct says, well, we're going to plug this hole, we're going to plug this hole there, and we're going to be proactive around anticipating everything could go wrong and sort of building that way. And I say, no, you have to make aggressive moves. In this case, that would mean an open convention. And it would mean, of course, um, you know, taking that risk of contestation through which Kamala may come through or may not. It would also mean going for potentially a really bold VP pick, rather than trying to say, well, how do we best protect ourselves against this, protect ourselves against that? That's important too. But the psychology has to be boldness and offense, otherwise you can't win. Because one of the problems is that you're inclined to be defensive sometimes, partly because you, in some dimensions, overestimate the big wave that you're up against. The opposition is sometimes more beatable than they seem because they're so intimidating and so reckless. But in other moods, you sort of oscillate in the opposite direction and think that this is 1998 and you can just repeat some of the old tricks and get over the line that way, but it's not. So rather than oscillating, um, a, a general stable boldness is the way to go all over the world. And I really know by that, I really believe that in my capacity as a political philosopher, a very minor public intellectual. So you play offense when the waters get patchy. You don't play defense. But yes, I do think that if this were any of my business, as it were, that I would be thinking about Josh Shapiro. I'd be thinking about, who would I be thinking about? Maybe Roy Cooper. Maybe for the best, Tommy is saying that Biden stepped down. Suzanne, thank you so much. But the manner is toxic for democracy. The fact that he was ostensibly ousted by the media, party elites, and donors worsens the crisis of trust. No, it doesn't. It's the opposite. It shows that the weakening Democratic Party had the chops to remove a guy from power who wasn't willing to go until he was. And because leaving voluntarily is so fantastic in democracy, we celebrate Joe Biden. But the truth is that Joe was internally, in his soul, in the arms of the forces of darkness for the last few weeks. And people like Nancy Pelosi and Barack Obama understood that Joe needed to go, and Joe wasn't accepting it. So that shows a political and bureaucratic capacity to react and change as you're sliding into not a catastrophe, but as you're sliding into a defeat to Trump. If Joe had stayed, his only way of beating Trump would have been an extreme event. I mean, even a year ago, I was saying Trump had a 70% chance of winning, and that dramatically increased recently. So the way that Biden could have won if he had stayed is if Vance and Trump had a public fight. If Vance quit, Trump replaced him with somebody else, and then that somebody else did a huge gaffe that made them need to step down too. So something extremely sort of farcically cataclysmic going wrong for the Trump campaign would have been Biden's path to victory. So he needed to be got out. And the kind of pressure that was exercised is not coup-like. It is part of legitimate, democratic, competitive democratic politics. So there's nothing sort of toxic about that pressure. It will be argued that it's bad, and the Trump campaign will try to argue that it's bad. But the point is that it's way more toxic for democracies in decline to be sliding further and further toward the waterfall and pretending that there is no waterfall there, that the river is just continuing flatly. That is the normal pattern of the collapse of the technocratic center. It's happening in France, little by little, to Macron. It's happening not yet, but in a few years, to Labour in the UK. So the technocratic center in Western politics dissolves by pretending that everything is okay until they lose. Now, taking action is constructive. So it's healthy for US democracy that Biden was, to some extent, pushed into this decision. Anybody freaking out? Stephen, thank you so much for saying that I'm amazing. Is there anybody freaking out who needs a bit of reassurance, or who thinks that something I'm saying is really weird? Because I want to do that grounding chat today rather than give you the full-on analysis, which is coming tomorrow. Pavel is saying, since President Putin has previously mentioned that he wished for Biden to win, what do you think his reaction is or might be to these developments now? So sorry, your first attempt got lost. Pavel, Putin likes chaos. I'll try to say in a condensed way, I think in the main channel video tomorrow, what exactly Putin's position is. But Putin likes chaos. He wants a very chaotic election, which means that while he on balance prefers a Trump victory, he wants chaos, not just between the two parties, but within the two campaigns. Putin wants the Democrats to quarrel and be inept. Putin wants Vance and Trump to fight with each other. Putin wants a very close election that is maximally contested, that leads to the maximal amount of tension in the US civic polity. So that's what he's about. So it's a sort of a chaos-inflected Trump preference, with in the back of their mind understanding that it could backfire for them, because there's a part of them that thinks that as Trump has a position that seems favorable to them, it's also possible that if he feels that's not realizable, that he could lapse into a position that is even more unfavorable to the Kremlin than the Democrat position. I'm not saying that's likely, but I'm saying the Kremlin could think that, and like they do think that a little bit. So they're also cautious that Trump could start favoring them, realize it's not going anywhere for him, and then lapse into arming Ukraine even more than Biden would have done. I'm not saying that's realistic, but I think they'd be thinking that in the back of their mind. So it's a definite preference for Trump, but with a lot of ifs and buts, a lot of worries attached. Um, no confidence and trust at all in Trump at all, really. And then the hope that there is chaos on both sides in the run up to the election, and that the election is divisive, and that after the election that there's debates about the legitimacy of the election. So that's what they want. They want a crisis of legitimacy, they want chaos, and they want civic division in the United States. And I'll try to kind of give you that in a more concentrated way, I hope, tomorrow. But thank you so much for asking. What do I think of Harris's political history? Her romantic involvement, Willie Brown, her cyst on her campaign, her supposed position as immigration czar. So Kamala Harris's background is limited, right? It's very much in the legal domain preponderantly. And Kamala's role as VP is caricatured. So, what she needs to do about all of her political biography and the period with Joe is to say, America, you don't know me. All of these videos of me laughing isn't me. All of these videos about me saying the same phrase over and over isn't me. Let me tell you who I really am. So she needs to reintroduce herself to the American people and not be defined by narratives about her past before VP period and the VP period. It would also not do her harm to emphasize that she's not Joe Biden, you know? And there were tensions between her and Biden during the administration, right? Even a little bit over Gaza. So now that's very, very important. She needs a complete redefinition and a reintroduction to the American people if she is going to be the one. And then she needs very well rounded answers to the question of why isn't Joe Biden going now if he hasn't capacity to stay for the next term? Why isn't he going right now? And then she needs an answer to the question, where were you when his incapacity was palpable for all of these months? And when did you discover his incapacity? And wouldn't you say anything about it, do anything about it earlier? Why did you let it get? So she needs good answers to these questions. But above all, she needs to reintroduce herself to the American people. And she also needs a little bit of media training because she is less dislikable and she comes across. She's disliked by the American people. She is the worst example of what I call the fake communication of technocratic centrists, whose laughter is insincere, right? So she needs to be told to be herself more and be more confident while speaking. And obviously, I can't do it, but I do have a couple of consulting hours a month open. So, in an alternate word, I could genuinely train her up about how to speak in the way that she cannot now. Obviously, I'm being ridiculous. To be serious, she needs to make some alterations and maybe get some advice from people because she is evidently a more compelling person in private than when she's in front of an audience with lots of cameras. There's a problem there. She's dislikable in her public presentation, and I believe that is changeable within 48 hours. So that's what I would do. Change the presentation, reintroduce herself to the American people, and have ready answers for questions that are going to come right at her about what on earth happened with this Joe Biden situation, whereby he wasn't leaving even though the issues were palpable for all to see, but then suddenly he left. Um, McCipher is saying Trump's the old man. The Democrats certainly should take that up as an issue. That now Trump is the one who's too old with Biden now. Absolutely. Stefan is saying, I think a part of Biden refusing to step down for so long was embarrassment over the public airing of his mental decline. No, no. He's unembarrassable about it, and that's part of the problem. He was thinking, I'm so good as a practical politician that screw it. I am at 34% of my capacity. I can't even read an autocue. I can't have discussions. I cannot speak properly. Screw it, though. And the funny thing about this is that even though Joe Biden is completely incapable of being president, given this limitation, and shouldn't be president for the next few weeks, but he will be, outside of public communication and outside of talking in a very intense way during concentrated meetings with foreign leaders, he is still, right now, today, a more effective practical politician than anybody who will run ahead of him instead of him. And I think Biden feels, God, but I don't know how long this cognitive decline will allow me to function even behind closed doors reasonably. But I think for a while it will. So Biden might have the thought that for the next year, even if his cognitive decline continues, he'll still be a slightly better practical politician than anybody else. And I actually think he is right. The trouble, though, is that I can't say that I have the best pressure cooker in the world and I've paid a bazillion pounds for it and it's the most sophisticated pressure cooker, but it just doesn't seal properly. You can't be the best pressure cooker if you can't seal properly. You can't, for goodness sake, be the best president if you can't do an elementary function of the presidency well, especially in a crisis of democratic decline. So the opposite, you see, Biden was too unembarrassable about his decline. He was saying, I'm so comfortable with this and I'm so good at this that screw this, right? Screw the fact that I can't speak. Come on, man, you know? So that was the issue, was the opposite. David saying, will the Republicans abandon Trump? The Trump movement will significantly crack if they lose. Absolutely. And then you're going to be looking at other movements in the future that build up. So don't think it's a kind of a reversion to normal if Trump sort of exhausts himself in terms of political efficacy. Yes, Tommy, it is part of Trump's appeal that technocrats have taken the country away. So the single biggest conflict, whether you are in Spain or in Austria, it doesn't matter. In certainly in the West today, the single biggest conflict is between um, a technocratic centrism that can't break through and directly speak to the people and compel them to take them seriously, to take the technocratic center seriously, and anti-institutional populism. So it's anti-institutional populism that 90% of the time takes the form of exploitative, bogus politics, and a technocratic centrism that can't address any of the real problems properly. So these are the two parties. One is pro-democratic institutions, but is incapable of solving any of the main problems we face. And the other is um, able to engage with the populations more directly, but offers bogus solutions. So anti-institutional populism that's a fraud in most of its instantiations, but not in all, but in almost all. And a technocratic centrism that thinks that it's 1998 when it just isn't. Both are failing people. And that's why it's wrong to do what most people are doing who are sort of responsible and maybe taking institutions seriously. It's just saying, come on, we've got to educate the population that's deluded that the technocratic center is in fact good after all. No, it's not a problem of delusion. The people who have given up on it are right. It's just that they are um, compelled by bogus solutions to the problems. I'm concerned the USA is too misogynistic to elect Harris. So I think that Harris's sort of Jamaican Indian background is a problem, but I don't think it's as big a problem as her fakeness communicatively. Her other problem is that she doesn't have any of that sternness that could sort of allay the doubts of the people who might be doubtful for race and gender reasons. Certainly there's going to be elements of racism and misogyny in how the vote plays. But the way you sort of win some of these people over is by being hyper competent and strong and stern on issues. For instance, the way Condoleezza Rice was on foreign policy, not approving of her concrete positions in the least, but that kind of firmness. And the problem with Kamala is that she is at the moment not a fully dimensional politician. Like she doesn't inspire confidence as someone who has very clear positions on the fullest range of issues that America faces at home and abroad. So she needs to develop that too as part of her introduction to the country, as the me who is not the fake Kamala you've been told about. But as I say, I think Kamala is, on balance, the weakest of all the candidates to beat Trump. And that's why, if it is to be Kamala, which it looks like it will be, the best way to try to beat Trump is to understand that she really will be up against a huge wave, not to think, oh, come on, we'll do it fairly easily. No, she has really got to climb a mountain, overcome a huge wave. So it's a massively uphill task. Biden should not be in public office PR. Biden, PR is asking, could Biden be vice president? No, Biden being vice president would endanger US democracy. This is one of the things that hasn't been discussed, that of course Trump's a semi-existential danger, but you see, Trump's a semi-existential danger, but a Biden presidency would inordinately have damaged US democracy. I mean, Biden had no way to win realistically now. But if miraculously he won because Vance and Trump had a public fight, let's say, Biden's presence would have been catastrophically damaging for US democracy, his presence in office, because he would have been experiencing deterioration of cognitive decline, incapacity to speak, as the leader of the most important democracy in the world at the most fraught and precious time in recent history. It would have been um, beating Trump would have still been a massive ethical disgrace for Biden because he shouldn't be there. But now that he has stepped down, um, he will have a very, very positive legacy. And on balance, I'll say, despite his battles with the forces of darkness recently, I think that will be deserved. A very positive legacy will be deserved. Two downsides, of course, for Biden's term will be not acting on cognitive decline earlier and the complicity in the destruction in Gaza. Jackie Chan, I think the change that's been made with Biden stepping down is very positive for US democracy. It shows capacity, right? The worst thing in a democracy is twisting, turning with nothing happening, you know? That's a problem. That's scary, but you've got efficacy here. You've got, a democratic institution, small, not capital D, Democratic Party, reacting to the fact that it had a candidate who was just on the way to lose, on the way to a defeat, and then managing to get him out and get him out in a way that leaves lots of question marks, but has positive aspects, such as Biden saying, I'm leaving as a patriot, going to put America first, got to do the right thing. So there's a lot that's positive about both Biden stepping down and about Biden being pushed out. These are two positives for US democracy. It shows capacity. Let's have a look where we are. One thing I would say is that privately, Barack Obama is very skeptical, I believe, about Kamala, which is why, unlike the Clintons, he essentially released a statement that was an open convention statement. And here, Barack is thinking two things: that Kamala may struggle to beat Trump. But the other thing he is thinking is that the best way for her to beat Trump is to engage and come out through a period of contestation. So Barack Obama is clearly expressing skepticism about, just how difficult Kamala's task is. Hello, Mike. Thank you so much. As a former political strategy guy, I think people are badly underestimating Harris. The polls are deceptive on her because the I don't know response in the crosstabs of the polls. I think that the Kamala Harris, right, Mike, that people know needs to be contrasted with the real Kamala Harris. And I think there's a lot of work to be done there. And that doesn't just mean some technical work around how she speaks, how she makes speeches. She's better at dialogue back and forth, but speeches are a real problem. And she needs to, in not so many words, say, my past and your image of me and all of these videos of me with fake laughter, which are real videos with really fake laughter. And all of these videos of me repeating the same thing, that's not me. That message needs to be conveyed by her. So she needs to reintroduce herself to the nation. And I do evidently feel that she is clearly more compelling in private than she is in a public space, as I was just saying earlier, with lots of cameras and a big audience. That gap needs to be bridged because at the moment, instinctively, people have a very, very bad feeling about her. A lot of Democrats have a really, really bad feeling about her. You can't hide that. So, she's got to take that head on rather than be in denial. So just like Biden, in the end, proved to himself that he could be honest about the cognitive decline, Kamala has to be honest about her unlikability, the unlikability of her public persona, and then try to change that. And then the other thing is, just as we were saying, you and I, a moment ago, Mike, on Twitter, boldness, 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 boldness. Being very bold and firm about how you go for the other side, and not being defensive, not concentrating on the precaution of not wanting to fall off the ledge, but instead going out there and making a very strong case for yourself, maybe even breaking some political taboos in the way you communicate, and going strong against the other side, hitting them hard and hitting Vance hard. Especially, I think there's a lot of efficacy in hitting Vance hard. Obviously, we will have this conversation 1,000 times in the coming weeks. But as a non-US citizen, the most important message I have is really this message of boldness when we are in choppy democratic waters and when we're competing. And that message of boldness applies not just to political candidates, but also to all public institutions, including media institutions. So it's important for media institutions to be bold too, and not play defense during the coming weeks. So I'm particularly impressed by how together everybody seems, because I think people are so concerned about US democracy that any major event in it, even a somewhat positive event, and I do think this is a somewhat positive event, a very positive event, in fact, tends to make people really worked up. But so far, we're doing really well. In fact, I'm feeling particularly useless. I'm going to check out at the hour mark and then focus a little bit on the more analytical main channel video for tomorrow. But I'm really impressed with everybody. Love to you, Vlad. Well, sad to see Joe go. Harry saying, I agree that this is an act to celebrate. Ruffy Ruff, thank you. Keep it up. Yeah, very impressed with you guys. But this is really good. But we also got to understand this is a long game. The fate of US democracy will not be sealed in November, in all likelihood. I won't be live tomorrow, but I will be on the main channel with, I don't know what messages yet, but it'll be much more analytical than just our ramblings today. I do have, because we're having a coffee conversation now, I do have a real urge to confiscate Kamala for 48 hours and do a little bit of communication tips, because I do think she can genuinely edge closer to victory with some transformations of this kind, because some of what is wrong with her communicatively is really negative. That's to say, you can tell her, Kamala, stop doing these 3 things, and already get her further ahead. So it's quite frustrating if she doesn't make that progress, but she has that ability. Mike is saying, I am encouraged by the increasing organization across left liberals and right liberals starting to coalesce with each other and starting the work of building a new normative discourse. There's real opportunity here to knock the limelight away from the Trump campaign. I'm just so impressed with everybody here. You see, sometimes you get the wrong impression. You get sort of 4 or 5 emails about people with people absolutely beside themselves, and then everybody's actually relatively calm. I'll tell you part of the reason I was sort of worried everybody would be really a lot more worked up than they are, is that I really think that something like 20% of us don't see what's wrong with Joe Biden. And I was thinking for these people, it'll be especially difficult today. Why has he left, given that he's got a stutter and nothing else? I really think a lot of people see it that way. And I do want to be profoundly empathetic with the fact that it could just look a little bit unintelligible to people like that. But I'm a bit impressed with all of us, I must say. TK McClone is saying, I wonder if Obama has communications people that'll help Harris with her media challenges. I think Obama is now being pressured to take a different line to the line he's taken, which is really an open convention line so far. He's being pressured to get in line. I think that's what's happening now. And his position still is that creating some competition may make Kamala stronger, not weaker, even if it's likely that she will win through that competition. Ideally, Obama doesn't think it should be Kamala, but he understands the reality is that it very probably will be. Does Joe need to get out from the president's chair? So it would be ideal if Joe just resigned for health reasons. That would be ideal. But, and we're speculating now about things that are beyond the realm of the realistic. So the fact that Joe's agreed to step down at the end of the term is already positive. But ideally, he should have altogether stepped down earlier, resigned earlier. And also, of course, if Kamala redefines herself and reintroduces herself to the American people, some of the most tempting Trump attacks on her will feel like they're not quite hitting the target because they're hitting a target that's now moved and isn't there anymore. Michael C is talking about Ukraine getting even more support under a Kamala presidency. Look, there's no doubt about who Ukraine should prefer. There are voices increasingly in Ukraine who prefer Trump. They're wrong. That's not good for Ukraine. But I would be skeptical about the rejuvenation of Western support for Ukraine under Kamala Harris presidency. I'd realistically just look forward to a continuation plus slowing of the drips and drabs that Ukraine gets now. They're not drips and drabs in scale. Objectively, it's huge support. They're drips and drabs relative to somebody who might aspire for Ukrainian victory, what that would need. Astro Gremlin is saying, if Biden isn't fit to run, how is he fit to serve for the next 6 months? So he isn't. But that's the outcome that we've got. And it's good of Biden to, it's good for democracy that Biden has at least agreed not to run. But this is a question to which Kamala needs a good answer. I think that there are stronger and weaker answers here, but she needs a good answer to this. And the best answer to it is he is going, and he was elected by the American people for this term. There's plenty of other good answers. Obviously, the third thing to say there would be, look at you, Trump, who doesn't like to leave when you lose. Lodge boy is saying Trump equals Putin as far as Ukraine is concerned. No, he doesn't. He doesn't. The Kremlin could have some bitter disappointments with Trump. It's just that they could have a good time with him as well. Born to Bomb, drop me an email. My 2 hours a month of consulting time will actually be formally available soon on my website. But you can drop me an email if you have an interest. The email is get in touch with Vlad at outlook.com. But you can also just find it in the YouTube info. Sometimes there can be a wait. So because of my health, I can only do an infinitesimal amount of this. Otherwise, I don't get to speak to you, which is much more important in a way, really, in terms of getting a conversation with the culture going. I am reading. I'm sorry, I'm silent. I'm just reading the comments. Very, very good. Well, let's begin just winding up a bit. So what happened has felt inevitable for a couple of days. We did a poll on the main channel, and I asked, will Biden go in the next 48 hours? And the answers were 50-50. This is good news for American democracy, not just because Biden has left graciously, has dropped out of the running graciously, but also because Biden being pressured is actually an expression of democratic efficacy. The fact that folks like Nancy Pelosi could get in there and exercise pressure is actually democratically good. Worst case scenario is that Kamala is indeed the worst of all the best people to run against Trump, but she is better than Biden. So whatever happens, this is a bad day for Trump. It's just that it's not a catastrophically bad day for Trump, but this is definitely a bad day for Trump. And for all of the public messages from the Trump campaign today, Trump's not feeling comfortable about this. He's not freaking out, but he's not feeling comfortable about this. This is a difficult and challenging day for them. So that's good. And whatever happens in November will not settle the fate of US democracy. It'll be the first of 4 or 7 or 11 stops that might settle the fate of US democracy over many, many more years. While I do still feel, because of a principle I'm deeply committed to, that an open convention would have been very much better, and that principle is this. In a phase of democratic decline, uncontested coronations are a bad idea. That's not much of a social scientific theory. It's just a generalization for our age. So really that contestation would have been another injection of health into US democracy on top of Biden's stepping down. But if it's not to happen, then while Trump certainly remains a strong favorite, this is a better situation than Biden going in against him. And also, on the scenario of the Democrats winning in November, an unlikely but slightly more likely scenario now, a Democrat presidency will not be toxic to US democracy the way a Biden presidency would have been because of Joe Biden's cognitive decline. So this is also really good that now you've taken away this problem that if the Democrats win, there's going to be democratic damage. There's going to be damage to US institutions, to US trust. And now that's to a good extent gone away. Read Mike in the comments, who is challenging me on my point about open convention. But I remain with Barack Obama on this for now. But Barack Obama may be being pressured to change his position as we speak. So a moderately good day for US democracy. And everybody wishes US democracy well because, whatever view we take of the domino theory for democracies, that's to say, does France having a weak democracy, a collapsing democracy in 2040 undermine German democracy, right? Is there this domino effect? We don't know. But what we do know is that there is one chain where domino effect clearly will be present. And that is if US democracy wobbles, other democracies wobble too. So US democracy has huge, huge symbolic and causal power to impact the state of US democracy, impact the state of all democracies. So this is really an important conversation for us all. I evidently was not at all needed for this chat. And if you're interested in a more robust analysis from me, probably about 6 or 7 in the evening tomorrow, UK time, I'm going to be on the main channel talking about the impact of Biden stepping down for Ukraine, for Western democracy, and to an extent for US democracy. I'm so grateful to each of you for having been with me and for not needing me because you're so calm and composed. Lot of love and catch you just in under 24 hours on the main channel. Bye, 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 bye.